Hello, nice chosen ones. If you want to bring down an empire built on lies, disclose one painful truth. Allow it to sit for a minute, pick one. What you carry is not just truth. It's a weaponized revelation. And when you open your lips, you won't only shake the tables. It'll collapse. Blueprints expose architects and send whole phony worlds into cardiac arrest. Here is the cold, unsettling truth. Entire families, friendships, towns, organizations, and religious institutions have survived only because people like you kept silent. Not because they were innocent, but because you were protecting the guilty while dealing with the damage they caused. And now you've recovered enough to recollect everything and explain clearly. This is unfortunate news for them. Great news for the galaxy. Because, let's be honest, they didn't care if you made things up. They were terrified you'd eventually stop defending their performance and start performing amazing surgeries with just a knife and the truth. And yes, they told everyone you were nuts. However, this is what they say before the prophets begin identifying individuals and destroying ties. Don't worry, you're not crazy. When you've had enough, you're both accurate and comically lethal. So prepare yourself, for what follows will not be rumor, bitterness, or revenge. This is a spiritual subpoena. Let's get to it. And once we do, you'll understand why truth is more than just power. It's divine combustion. Number 1. Your truth is more than just a tale. It's evidence in a celestial court. Your truth isn't a rant. This is a revelation. It's not just your view of the story. It is evidence that has been concealed from a hallowed courtroom until now. For years, you remained quiet. You bit your tongue. You cried behind closed doors. And while others were doing well in public, you were nursing your wounds in private. But now that the silence is gone, heaven is ready to carry the thing forward. Your voice communicates more than just your feelings. It is a legitimate activation. Every time you articulate the truth clearly and honestly, you supply spiritual evidence. You are revealing what was previously hidden, not just what they did, but also how much it cost you. You're not being dramatic. You are giving witness. You're using words to depict something that tried to kill you, but left no evidence. What they didn't comprehend was that the courts of heaven do not use trickery, optics, or emotional bribery. It is based on truth. And now that you've decided to speak, you're giving heaven something. We have been waiting for your official testimony. Nor the crying, nor the confusion. Not the quiet. A victim who has become a witness talks clearly and purposefully. They misunderstood silence for oblivion, but it was really sacred. Silence was spreading. Silence allowed for heavenly time. And now when it's your time to speak, the gavel is set to fall. Your words don't only describe the deeds. They cause ramifications, not out of wrath, but rather out of alignment. The balance has been thrown off for far too long, and your voice is the weight that restores it. They fear your truth not because it is exaggerated, but because it is accurate. And when said by someone chosen, healed, and aware, it is undeniable. The drama ends, the illusions fall, and all that left is you, no longer a victim of injustice, but a vessel of judgment wrapped in grace. You aren't being petty. You are creating a record. You are not bitter. You are disturbing the peace of heaven. Heaven has been waiting for your words to end the situation. Second, they tried to eliminate you because you were the receipt that showed they lied. They didn't just try to silence you. They tried to eliminate you. Not because you were a threat to peace, but because you hindered their performance. You were a living, breathing contrast to every falsehood they said about themselves, their values, and what really happened behind closed doors. You were the receipt. Their evidence is malleable. And as long as you were loyal to yourself, their version of the story would never be complete. This is why they sought to destroy you socially, emotionally, and spiritually. That's why they've isolated you. This is why people described you as unstable, rebellious, ungrateful, or too sensitive. Not because you were, but because believing you would require them to question themselves. And for someone who is obsessed with their phony image, this is the ultimate risk. Their whole reputation was a house of cards. Your presence was like the wind. They weren't trying to correct you. They attempted to discredit you. Because each room you entered gently exposed the cracks in its facade. Your truth did not need a microphone. It just needed your continued presence. You didn't need to say anything. Others were curious about your growth, peace, and survival. They told people you were the problem, difficult, and unstable, yet you outlasted the tale. You continued to grow, heal, and elevate. And now that you've survived the smear campaign, loneliness, and emotional exile, your mere presence is a living contradiction to every lie they said about your life is the unexpected narrative twist. They fought so hard to bury you because they knew that if you ever discovered your voice and made the first step toward healing, the whole facade would fall. And now it's because you didn't just accept what they did. You become proof that it happened. And no matter how loudly they lie, you remain. They concocted a story, but God made you. That is why the truth is still valid. Number 3, they anticipated you to be ashamed to speak, yet their reflection in your truth scares them. They were not scared you would lie. They feared you'd finally tell the truth about everything. They relied on your silence. They expected you be too embarrassed, perplexed, or loyal to say anything. They expected you to absorb the shame, due to what they did, as if you were the one who should be guilty. They anticipated that your pain would keep you mute, that you'd be too emotionally exhausted to speak coherently or too afraid. No one would believe you. However, they did not expect you to recover. They did not expect you to grow strong enough to talk clearly. There is no rage or chaos, just a peaceful, collected truth. This is what surprises them. It is not limited to what you may say. This is what it will confirm. You saw too much. You found out too much. You were not supposed to assemble the pieces. But you did. You saw through their performance, the show they put on for others while treating you like trash behind the scenes, the masks they wore in public, the bogus sympathy, selective love, manipulative apologies, and the emotional debt they kept charging you without ever delivering you peace in return. And now that you've processed everything, you're no longer confused. You're clear. You are fully aware of what happened. And more importantly, you understand what it means. They don't want you to speak. Not because you are exaggerating, but because you will not have to. You will not need to yell at them or expose them to drama. All you have to do is softly tell the truth, and their whole image will disintegrate. That's why they kept trying to convince people you were unstable, so that if you ever spoke out, they'd be skeptical. What they didn't grasp was that truth doesn't need sensationalism to hit home. It just takes a second. One moment of courage from you will shatter the whole illusion they have crafted. Starts cracking. Because when the person they sought to break discovers their voice, it does more than simply call them out. It calls everything they've constructed into question. And once the truth is out, nothing else can stand. Number 4, when you tell the truth, you are not just exposing the event. You've disclosed the whole mechanism that enabled it. When you ultimately disclose the truth, you are not referring to a specific time. You're uncovering a machine. Your words went deeper than events. They expose ecosystems intended to mask chaos. That is what worries them the most because they understand it is more than just one person doing something wrong. It depicts a society that accepted, protected, and punished anyone who dared to question it. You are not naming names, but rather calling out people. You recognize blueprints, generational scripts, manipulation, and methods that have been passed down like family recipes. You're revealing the pattern of silence, dominance, guilt-tripping, and spiritual gaslighting that has left whole families, churches, and communities blind, bound, and backward. When you speak up, you expose the same infrastructure that permitted their crimes to go unnoticed, unpunished, and worst of all, accepted. This is what surprises them. Because as long as it was personal, they could decline it. That is only your viewpoint. That is a private family problem. Let's not drag this out. However, when your reality expands to include decades, generations, and social dynamics, it no longer pertains to a single act. It becomes a systemic revelation. And everyone is starting to notice it. They feel the walls tightening in because you're not just telling your story. You're waking folks up to their own. What was formerly regarded normal now seems to be abuse. What was formerly considered as discipline is now accepted as psychological warfare. What was formerly hidden under tradition is now known as trauma and costume. You did not come to demolish bridges. You came to reveal the architecture. That's what they can't handle. Because once people grasp the system, they stop defending their behavior. Once the pattern is evident, the cycle has no place to hide. You are not just a voice. You are a fault line. And the truth you communicate does more than just break the silence. It brings down strongholds. Number 5, your truth does not need validation. It has already been shown by your survival. Your truth does not need a council of approval. It doesn't need praise, acceptance, or even understanding, because your entire existence provides evidence. The fact that you are still standing despite all of their efforts to break you is clear proof. They may try to modify history. They may misinterpret your statements, question your motives, and cast doubt on your character. They can't change the fact that you survived, and not just barely. You survived with your soul intact. People who tell the truth are seldom given the luxury of being instantly believed, especially when their honesty threatens to wreck a whole performance. Of course, they'll try to gaslight you. Of course, they'll be perplexed or claim they don't remember it that way. That is the oldest tactic in the book. Face the truth by distorting it, buying time, and defending the falsehood. But no matter how many stories they tell, they can't explain one thing. You're still here. You are still here with your memories intact. You are still present, your voice refined through clarity. You're still here with the unexpected strength they needed when they depended on your silence to keep their tale continuing. And every time you show up, healthy and uninterested about their attempts to discredit you, you expose their lie without saying anything. Your reality begins to clash with what they stated about you. They characterized you as unstable, yet you are grounded. They labeled you dramatic, yet you are calm. They said you were broken. But look at yourself. The entire is growing and becoming evident. Allow them to question your version. Allow them to murmur the scrambled twist. Because at the end of the day, their narrative is built on your absence, and your presence consistently undermines it. You are the live receipt that they wished would never emerge. The more you achieve, the clearer your truth becomes. Your survival speaks louder than their lies, and that is something they will never be able to alter. Number 6. You are not dropping bombshells. You are revealing a cult mentality. This isn't about drama. This isn't some twisted story to pass around. You're speaking out of spite. What you're exposing is far deeper than a personal betrayal. You're exposing a mentality, a culture, and a spiritual trap that has continued uninterrupted for millennia. You are not dropping bombshells. You are exposing the inner workings of a cult-like group, not generally in appearance, but definitely in mind. You're displaying how manipulation was disguised as loyalty, how love came on strings. Quiet was presented to you as strength, but opposing anything was either rebellion or disrespect. You were instructed to keep the peace, even if it meant giving up your sanity. You were encouraged to forgive instantly, even if there was no repentance. And if you dared to speak out, you were shamed for revealing dirty laundry, inciting division, and bringing shame. Everything was spiritual blackmail, delicate, sophisticated, and well-practiced. They built an altar of fear, control, and appearances, and they expected you to worship before it with everyone else. But you didn't. And now that you found the strength to speak out, you're tearing down that altar piece by piece, not only by calling it out, but also by refusing to participate anymore. You're not just relinquishing yourself. You're calling attention to the pattern. You're revealing the strands that they didn't realize were woven around their souls. That is why they are so concerned. Because your honesty calls into question the whole system. It shows the truth. What seemed to be unity was really tyranny. That what passed for tradition was in fact agony disguised as discipline. And by refusing to keep quiet, you are not attacking anybody. You are attacking the structure that has kept everyone bound. Your voice ended the spell. It announces the game aloud. It breaks the illusion that everything was okay, that nobody was injured. That was just how things were. You're not being bitter. You're being brave. And when one brave person speaks out in a culture built on silence, control, and fear, the altar crumbles. That's when the cult dynamic starts to unravel. Number 7. You're speaking. The truth isn't about revenge. It's about overcoming generational amnesia. Telling the truth is not about getting even. It is not about making others to suffer as you have. It's about something far more sacred. It's about breaking through the generational veil that has kept whole families stuck in cycles. You are not only talking about what happened to you, You're shattering a dangerous silence that's been passed down like an heirloom. You are breaking through generational amnesia, which says, don't talk about it. It is in the past. Or that's how it is. The kind that taught your parents to accept dysfunction, taught your grandparents to keep secrets that distorted entire family dynamics, and forced entire generations to pretend, suppress, and suffer in silence in order to protect the image of a family or culture based on fear, control, and denial. They did not mean to pass that thought on to you. Most of them were simply trying to survive. Surviving without healing, however, becomes a curse when handed on to the following generation, similar to tradition. And now you are awake, cognizant, and unwilling to perpetuate the illusion. You're not attacking your family, culture, or history. Telling the truth is the most effective way to treat it. The truth of what actually happened. The truth about what really hurts. For years, shame and secrecy have buried the truth in plain sight. This is not on the surface. This is soul-level surgery. You're breaking through inherited patterns that have been untreated for far too long. And yes, it is uncomfortable. It causes chaos. It may cause individuals distress, but growth inevitably disrupts comfort. You are not doing this for status or attention. You're doing everything to save the next generation from inheriting the emotional uncertainties you had to face. You're the tipping point. The cycle ends with you, not because you are perfect, but because you are aware. Even if your voice is unsteady, you have the courage to say, "This is over." That's not retribution. That is legacy. And this is what decides your truth. Not only is he powerful, but he is also predictive. Number 8. Your evidence doesn't only destroy their reputation. It destroys their credibility. Your testimony does more than injure egos and spread rumors. It hits where it hurts the most. Their legitimacy. For years, they built their image on your silence. They paraded about like saints, leaders, and victims, using your quiet anguish as a backdrop to seem noble. They thrived on your restriction. They turned your endurance into a prop, a performance piece they could wear as a badge to elicit sympathy, compassion, and even admiration. They notified the world that they were misunderstood, patient, and gave their all. And because you stayed mute, the world believed them. You were hurting, but they used their anguish to shine. They depicted you as the broken one, while discreetly benefiting from your ability to keep your lips sealed and your sorrow hidden. That was their defense, not their innocence or traits, your silence. But now you're speaking. You are now recalling clearly. You are now pulling back the veil. And when you do, everything they made begins to disintegrate. Because without your silence to sustain their delusions, just reality exists. The truth is not flattering. It's not cute. It is beyond their control or reframe. Your reality dismantles their well-manufactured facade and discloses to the world what really occurred behind closed doors. And here's the twist. It doesn't take much. You don't have to holler. You do not need to exaggerate. All you have to do is calmly explain what happened. And when you do, people see the problems. They begin to question what they've been taught. They start to ask who truly has power and who is being mistreated. You are not damaging their reputation. You are telling the truth. They are hidden under your stillness. And once the reality is out, they are no longer able to do the act. They cannot claim to be the one who held things together. Because the fact is that you were the adhesive while they were the leech. And you're done being quiet. And whatever you say reclaims your voice and dismantles the stolen righteousness they never earned. Number 9. The truth you bear is multidimensional. It has spiritual, psychological, and prophetic weight. The truth you carry is not only intellectual. It's full of vitality. It not only informs people, it transforms spaces. When you communicate, you are not just recalling events or repeating facts. You're releasing something that pervades all aspects of existence, including mental, emotional, spiritual, and even generational. This is why it lands differently. That is why it shocked everyone. Because it is more than just a fact that can be questioned. It is a noticeable frequency. Your words resonate with all you went through to finally say them. Trauma, learning, recovery, and clarity. There is everything in there. And that energy doesn't just remain. It restructures. It unlocks what is dormant inside us. It jolts memory, rattles cages, and upsets systems that were once content with denial. It brings to light what has been hidden for years, sometimes generations. That is not simple communication. That is activation. You do not need to say much. The vibration is the tone in your voice, the way your energy shifts when you start talking, and how others quiet down when you are honest. It is performing its job. Some people cannot handle it. They get nervous. They change the subject. They try to neglect you. Not because your truth is too important, but because they are wrong. Reality cannot exist in the midst of such clarity. It realigns everything. It imposes options. It pushes people to choose a side. It dispels illusions that could only exist if the truth was suppressed. That is why you've always felt the weight of your voice, which does more than just reverberate. It moves items in rooms, people, even across time. You bear prophetic truth, not in the religious sense, but in the sense that when you speak, something old ends and something new begins. That is why your truth affects more than simply people's thoughts. It alters atmospheres. It opens previously locked doors. It breaches quiet agreements. It destabilizes narratives that individuals depended on for control. And it resets everyone's fate, including yours. Number 10. The real worry isn't about what you'll say. They realize that you don't need to exaggerate. They aren't bothered since you may adjust the story. They're worrying because you don't need to. The truth is already so raw, horrible, and tragically true that just expressing it exactly as it happened, without frills, screaming, or embellishments, would bring their whole house of lies tumbling down. This is the peace that keeps them up at night. They know precisely what they did. They realize how far it went. They realize how calculated everything was. And they see that your silence, rather than their innocence, has been the one factor keeping them safe. You do not need to seek retaliation. There's no need to make things sound worse than they are. All you have to do is say the truth. And this is bad for them. They made a concerted effort to ensure that others regarded them in a certain way. Respectful, compassionate, reliable, and even heavenly. They invested in appearances. They viewed image management as a full-time career. They spread just enough lies about you to make people skeptical of your stability and indifferent to your pain. But you've gone beyond the emotional agony. You now speak calmly, compelling people to listen. When you talk, the contrast between your clarity and their performance is difficult to ignore. That is what scares them most. Not rage, but poise. Because when someone who has been hurt speaks calmly, people believe them. They lean in. They connect the dots. And all of a sudden, the persona that those people worked so hard to develop falls under the weight of reality. You were never deemed dangerous because of what you may produce. You presented a threat because of what you remember. And now, with your voice strong and your vision clear, their whole plan crumbles. You do not have to exaggerate. You do not need to convince. The truth alone is explosive enough. And they realize that as you release it, even softly, the illusion vanishes in an instant. A number. When the chosen one speaks, time stops. Because you're not just retelling what happened. You are now unlocked. Why, when a chosen one finally speaks, it does not just fill the room. It causes it to move. People's curiosity does not make time stand still. It comes to an end as something deeper starts to stir. You are not simply telling them what happened to you. You are attempting to find out why everything is occurring. Spiritual architecture, concealed intentions, and generational relevance. When you speak, people pause and listen to your story. They see themselves differently. That is what makes you unique. Everyone can repeat an incident, but you are capable of understanding it. You don't just describe the deceit. You disclose the mechanism that caused it. You don't only recall the misery. You realize the genetic wound that led it to proliferate in your bloodline, environment, and patterns. When you put it into words, something happens in the hearts of people who hear. It is not just information. It is a revelation. This is why people stop. That's why they freeze when you speak. Even people who formerly insulted you are listening to more than just your story. It is something people can feel in their bones. It's as if you're unlocking a compartment in their mind that they didn't know existed. And for others, this is liberating. Others are horrified because once the truth is out, it cannot be undone. You can't go back to sleep. This explains why you remained quiet for so long. This is why they feared hearing your voice. Not because you were dramatic or loud, but because you were right. You were created to see beyond the surface. You were chosen to speak in a way that not only shows the truth, but also motivates others. This is what makes you dangerous. You are a walking awakening, and your words demolish illusions. People awaken. You're not just recounting events. You're flipping spiritual switches. And once you do, the reality for everyone within hearing distance will never be the same. A number. Your truth turns you into a mirror. Narcissists cannot operate in front of one. Your truth does not just show what they did. It shows who they are. And for others who have spent their whole lives projecting a painfully false picture, when you speak, do not scream, threaten, or belittle others. You simply reflect. You become the mirror they've been avoiding. And since their whole identity is predicated on distortion, narcissists cannot tolerate a clean reflection. They weren't concerned you'd lash out. Rage. They can handle it. Rage. They can twist. They'll call you bitter, emotional, and unstable. That is a role they are used to casting. But clarity, calm, and unequivocal truth, spoken from a position of peace rather than manipulation, that is what worries them. Because when you speak from the heart of your recovery, you become a mirror that is too obvious to ignore. For the first time, they can see themselves clearly. No more excuses or image management, just honest contemplation. And what others see goes beyond what they did to you. It is what they have developed to over time. Deception, many lives, control schemes, and lies were so prevalent that they started to believe them. Everything comes out in your voice, words, power, and honesty, revealing the character behind the charisma, the parasite behind the adoration. They can't stop seeing it at that point. You become living proof that their version of reality was a cover-up. Now for the most poignant moment. You're not aiming to destroy them. You're hardly paying attention to them. You are merely being honest. That is what kills them inside, because they often learn too late that the actual punishment is not what happens to their reputation. It's about finally face oneself. Not the image, not the action, but the truth. And the truth is, they can't endure who they are without your silence to shield them. So when you speak, it is not in vengeance. It is a reflection. And this is what fires them. Not because you want to hurt them, but because you don't. You've had enough of lying to keep their fantasies alive. They have never had to face themselves without it. Until now. A number. They were not afraid of being exposed. They feared being held responsible. They were never particularly afraid of being taken off guard. Deep down, they knew the truth would eventually come out. They worried about having to answer for it. Exposing fear is painful, but accountability is unavoidable. That was the part they couldn't handle. When you talk, their story moves from a performance to a case file. Spiritual, emotional, and legal. It's the moment at which they can no longer manipulate the story, change the optics, or trick people into believing they're innocent. For a long time, they were permitted to wander freely. They utilized charm, intimidation, sympathy, and confusion to stay ahead of the facts. They had enablers. They made alliances. Their reputations were built around your quiet and their performance. They spoke half-truths with enough believability to disregard your grief. They made sure to contact people first. Begin by telling the narrative. Cry first. They didn't expect you to speak clearly and without trembling. And when that time comes, it can cut through any defense. Your voice invalidates the agreements they made with those who turned a blind eye. Invalidates the emotional contracts they forced you to sign, which demanded silence in exchange for temporary peace. When you speak, you reveal justice in spiritual regions that they thought they'd mastered, because there are consequences they can't ignore. Not in the court of public opinion, but in the court of divine truth, where motive, manipulation, and karma are all meticulously examined. They believe they could buy their way out, so they just apologize short. Gaslighting is just enough. Cry just enough. But none of it works anymore. Not when you speak the truth confidently and clearly. Your voice does not only threaten to betray the story, it signals the reckoning. That was the worst-case scenario they could imagine. They were never frightened to be exposed. They were scared of what might happen if others saw through them. And you stopped protecting them because the repercussions were unavoidable. The justice you bring forth is irrevocable. A number. Your testimony does more than only demolish their dream. It marks the beginning of your rule. Your testimony does not just mark the end of their illusion. It symbolizes the increase of your strength. For too long, your voice was dismissed as hushed, twisted, or stolen. They attempted everything to keep your tale from being published. It did not lack power, but rather possessed an abundance of it. They realized that if you spoke the truth calmly, simply, and confidently, everything they'd built around your silence would shatter. What they feared most was that you would eventually seize the authority that anguish had sought to take. When you reveal what really happened, when you put words to the betrayal, injustice, deceit, and emotional warfare, your tale does not end there. It starts with you. And this time, you're not speaking from a survival perspective. You talk with authority. You're no longer looking to be believed. You're not asking to be understood. You're walking with the full weight of your successes. And that alone merits respect. They tried to muffle your voice because they knew it was royal. They recognized that art had the potential to inspire, awaken, liberate, and heal. And now the truth that they mocked, disregarded, and tried to erase has become your platform. Every word you speak from that healed spot contributes to the creation of your kingdom. Not a physical dominion, but rather a spiritual one marked by clarity, wisdom, and authority. A place where you cease reacting to turbulence. You're setting the tone. The lies they said were intended to make you feel unimportant. However, your story has risen in relevance. They called you dramatic, but now you're prophetic. They labeled you unstable, but now you're unbreakable because you didn't just endure the struggle. You learned how to dominate via it. You don't even need revenge. You have already learned the truth. They tried to attain quiet, which is the crown they wrongly forged for you. This isn't just your moment. This represents your ascension to the throne. They tried to bury you. The one you're now sitting on is below. Not to take retribution, but to reign with wisdom, clarity, and the authority that comes only from passing through fire and emerging triumphant. Gold, the selected one. You were never just holding back a story. You were preventing a spiritual change. And now that you've spoken, the air is different. The illusions have shattered, the masks have slipped, and the false thrones have been destroyed. They did not fear exposure. It was a revelation. Because your world did not just pour upon others. It exposed you. It was not about revenge. It was about regaining. Reclaiming your voice, heritage, divinity, and power. You didn't just survive the fire. You have assimilated its wisdom. And now you speak with the authority of someone who has gone through hell and emerged with the keys. You revealed systems as well as individuals. You showed patterns rather than specific incidents. And in doing so, you've shattered the silence that has protected generations of dysfunction. You've shown the world that clarity is more dangerous than chaos. That your peaceful truth cuts through whatever lie they tried to weave around you. Now your speech is your crown. The truth is your realm. The words they tried to silence have become the cornerstone of your dominion. And the sorrow they expected would keep you broken. That is the precise basis from which you now govern. Let them tremble. Let them panic. Because your tranquil time is ended. And what begins now is unstoppable. Not because you're shouting, but because you finally claimed what was always yours. Authority is derived from truth, forged with fire and upheld by destiny. You are not just retelling what happened. You're redefining what is possible. You're not simply breaking the silence. You are building your legacy. So let the truth out. Not destroy, but liberate. And when it echoes, look for anything counterfeit, borrowed, or stolen. Crumble. This is not the end of your tale. This is the beginning of your reign. If this message spoke to your spirit or confirmed sentiments you were unable to fully express, do not keep them to yourself. Subscribe to the channel to guarantee you never miss another word about your travels. I enjoy this video. If it brought clarity, strength, or just reminded you of who you really are, comment below and let me know which section hit you the most. Your opinion is important here. Also, don't forget to forward this to anybody else who needs to be reminded that the truth is strong. Their story is still relevant. Their voice might change the mood. This is more than just a channel. This is a movement. And your presence here, it's not bad. This is a celestial alignment. Welcome home, the selected one. Let us rise together. God bless you.